Praise Kier, Severance is back with Season 2 and telling me that one thing I never heard from my parents.
I love you.
From underage middle managers, Photoshop news articles, and Keanu Reeves doing the voiceover, we have a lot to cover. If you want a bit of a recap from Season 1, check out my video on that, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. I do plan on covering the entire season, so make sure you like and subscribe so you're notified as soon as one of my videos drops. Get ready, waffle time incoming. Season 2 picks up right where we left off, or at least that's what we think. Mark scouts Innie arrives back at Lumon after the overtime contingency initiated at the end of Season 1 was subverted by Seth Milchik. But what was an instant for Mark was 5 months for those of us unsevered up top, or at least that's what Milchik tells us. In fact, there are a lot of lies and disinformation told to our innies we'll need to be wary of, and I'll point them out as we go along. Mark runs towards the wellness department in search of Miss Casey, who he found out in his outies world was his dead wife, Gemma. Miss Casey was fired in Season 1 and sent down this mysterious black hallway with the red triangle pointing down. This is the same thing Irv's outie paints over and over again. This is a level of Lumon we've not yet seen. Since Miss Casey is supposed to be dead in the outie world, she can't really go back up like our regular severed workers, so this elevator seems to be the alternative. At the end of the episode, we get a flash of Miss Casey on Mark's computer as he gets back to work on his Macrorefinement data. It seems to suggest there's a link between what they do in MDR and her. Perhaps Miss Casey went down into, for lack of a better word, cold storage. Her file is called Cold Harbor after all, where her memory can be wiped clean and rebuilt by members of Macrorefinement. Shout out to my friend Alyssa, who, before this episode aired, theorized MDR is actually rebuilding Kier Eagan himself, the original founder of Lumon, and that might still be partly true. The 4 bins represent Kier Eagan's 4 tempers: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. As a quick aside, there's a frolic poster in the newly reformed break room. Remember in Season 1 that the MDR workers said the numbers can make you feel something, such as when Helly felt this grouping made her feel scared. This is dread, one of those 4 tempers. When a newly severed person arrives at Lumon, they are essentially a blank slate. Remember back to episode 101 where Helly is given a list of questions, including who are you, what is Mr. Eagan's favorite breakfast, and to the best of your memory, what is or was the color of your mother's eyes. These are all questions that should be addressed to Kier Eagan, so I'm wondering if every severed person may contain a little bit of him, making them somehow all connected and giving them the ability to connect with these numbers. If we go back to the Season 1 finale, we'll see Helena's father, James Eagan, talk about how everyone in the world will one day get one of these chips, stating that then,
they'll all be Kier's children.
Lumon has always been about molding people into the image of Kier. The office has Kier paintings, quotes, and books. It's not a stretch to then imagine that Lumon intends on molding the world into this image, and the way to do that is through these chips. While watching episode 201, 2 thoughts came to mind. Can someone be severed more than once, and can one person's severed memory be implanted into a different body? If either or both of these are true, this show is sure to get a hell of a lot more bonkers. I have the sneaking suspicion some form of consciousness or memory transfer is going on with the Eagans. James refers to something called the Revolving, where Helena will sit by him. It implies the transference of something, perhaps memory, awareness, or consciousness. I also suspect James is dying. Not only does he sound frail in his talk with Helly, but he says the line, "I cried in my bed when I heard what she did to you," a reference to when Helly tried to commit suicide. Why did he say, "I cried in my bed"? Why did we need that detail of the bed? Why not just say, "I cried when I heard what she did to you"? It just felt odd. The Revolving may even be the transference of consciousness to a computer of some sorts. For example, what if the board isn't a group of individuals, rather a motherboard that contains the consciousness or souls of past Eagans? It would explain why the board never talks. There's another theory that the consciousness of Kier Eagan is transferred from Eagan to Eagan. There's just one problem with this. Kier Eagan died in 1939, and James tells us the prototype for this severance chip was created when Helena was a child, which was decades later. Perhaps people like Miss Casey are but test subjects on how to bring someone back from the dead that they have yet to perfect, and once it is perfected, Lumon can bring back some version of Kier based on all his writings. But back to Mark and his search for Miss Casey. Casey. Although I don't think this is the case, there is the possibility we're in a totally different location. After all, Lumon has branches in 206 countries, which is rather odd since the world only has 195, at least according to the UN. And what about this mysterious figure appearing behind Mark? My only real guess is Mr. Grainer, who often patrolled the hallways as part of his security detail, but he died in episode 107. If this is really him, he would be the second person we know, after Miss Casey, who died and was brought back to life. Upon arriving back at MDR, Mark finds his co-workers replaced. These new workers come from different severed branches, including Dario here from Italy. We learn that his branch was relatively poor, which may explain a wooden sculpture of him unlike the glass one Mark has. We also meet this young woman named Huang. Huang in Chinese has several meanings like yellow and phoenix, but it's phoenix that I really want to talk about. A phoenix goes through a process of rebirth, so maybe this ties into why she is so young. Was she brought back to life like Miss Casey? Is she a test subject on children? In episode 102, we meet members of the Whole Mind Collective who spew conspiracy theories that Lumon is testing on children. It's also possible Huang is an intern from the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls, this same school Miss Cobel went to. She did say her previous job was a crossing guard. Even though she seems quite mature, she still likes playing games on the computer and has a Kier toy in her desk. With Miss Cobel seemingly fired, Milchik is the new manager, and he gives Mark this whole song and dance of what happened in those last 5 months. And I really gotta say, I'm not buying it. Check out this clearly photoshopped picture of the Lumon employees standing in a car treated as heroes at a ticker tape parade. This is just their employee photo that they all took together, and the real image is JFK's ticker tape parade in New York when he became the Democratic nominee. Now this paper is chock full of interesting bits of information. Notice the name of it is the Kier Chronicle. I'm sure it's fair and balanced when it comes to anything Lumon. Back in season 1, we learned that Lumon has control over some of the biggest news outlets and even politicians. There are 3 different articles here. The one on the left is all about a burglar known as the Baird Creek Bandit, who breaks into people's houses during the day. Mark lives in Baird Creek, and there's even a Grin and Baird It poster in the break room. Baird Eagan was also a former Lumon CEO. The article in the middle is all about how the innies were treated as heroes for what will become known as the Macrodata Uprising. In it is another clue that what we're reading is bullshit, as there's mention of Mark's brother-in-law Dr. Rick and Hale having written a book called These Values 9, How I Let Kier In. The 9 values referring to Kier's 9 virtues. Remember that the innies found Rickon's book in season 1 and look up to him as a hero, but the real Rickon doesn't like Lumon or Kier. In fact, in episode 109 we learned he judged Mark for going through with the severance procedure. So why would he write a book praising him? I don't think he did. This was put in the article to sway Mark and any of the other innies that Kier is good. Also, Lumon's reforms are pretty superficial and include improved snacks, field trips, and sexual liberation. I'm sure that will go over well with HR. Final article on the right is all about a new Lumon innovation that changes the molecules in plastics. If they can change the molecules in plastic, what else can they change? There are also a slew of weird things that Milchik states that give me red flags, including Miss Cobel having an erotic fixation on Mark, and that none of Mark's other co-workers wanted to come back, but Mark begged Lumon to come back. If you recall back in 109, Mark's outie was actually thinking of quitting Lumon, so this doesn't add up. But the biggest red flag is that Milchik won't let any of Mark's past co-workers talk to him.
That's not possible.
Also, a shout out to the show's attention to detail. You can actually track Mark's day minute by minute by looking at the clock. In every scene, starting from his arrival at 9:05 a.m., we see the clock move forward in time. And I must say there are a lot of references to clocks and time. Of note is when Mark finishes his day, we don't get to see his outie. In fact, we don't get to see any of the outies or anyone from up top like Miss Cobel for that matter. There are more red flags here than my ex-girlfriend. After a failed attempt at sabotaging Mark W. with a note, Mark runs into Milchik's office to contact the board, but we get this very odd drawer filled with a brush and Japanese tube. I had this translated, and it's a product used for cuts and wounds during the pruning of plants. This brush here is called a shuro brush, often used in the sweeping of bonsai trees. Bonsai trees represent harmony, and is it just a coincidence that happens to be Miss Cobel's first name? Also, I found it kind of cool that there's just a solitary iceberg photo on the wall, a metaphor that we've only reached the tip of the iceberg when it comes to discovering what Lumon is doing. Mark's unsuccessful attempt at contacting the board has him booted by Milchik, in what he describes as being fired, yet he returns an unknown amount of time later, conveniently followed by Dylan, Irving, and Helly. It seems Milchik, or Lumon as a whole, is doing everything it can to make these innies stay, including this giant painting of Kier titled Kier Pardons His Betrayers, with 4 betrayers, 3 men, 1 woman, who vaguely resemble our innies. I gotta say, this is the part of the episode that stumped me the most. Suddenly, Dylan, Helly, and Irv, who Milchik told us didn't want to come back. The replacement MDR employees are gone. It's as if the first 20 minutes of the episode didn't happen, and we pick up right after the events of the season 1 finale. Now, I was racking my brain how to explain this, but my theories were so insane that I had to slap myself. Like, are they all clones? Is Mark severed multiple times? Let me know what you think in the comments. With the innies reunited, they're taken to the new and improved break room where they're shown a video on just how their exploits changed the company for the better. This video, which sounds like it's voiced by Keanu Reeves, will be shown to all new severed employees. It proves that Lumon had been watching them the whole time, as it references actual lines our characters said in season 1.
Let's burn this place to the ground. Let's burn this place to the ground.
They even know about Mark and Helly's kiss. Their relationship is about to get a whole lot weirder when he tells her that his outie's wife is none other than Miss Casey. Now, Milchik says the break room is the only room that doesn't have mics or cameras, and I'm not exactly sure I believe him. Either way, the group discloses what they saw when their innies took over the bodies of their outies. The biggest surprise here is Helly. She actually lies to everyone about what she saw, and Irv kinda picks up on this.
A night gardener.
The most logical explanation for this lie is that she doesn't want them to know she's the very person they want to destroy, Helena Eagan, the next in line to lead Lumon. Now, Mr. Milchik gives all the outies the opportunity to leave for good if they so choose, a choice that was not afforded to them in season 1. It's all very suspicious, but each of our innies have their own reasons for wanting to stay. Mark wants to get to the bottom of what happened to Miss Casey. Helly says she wants to help Mark, although she may have ulterior motives. She does get rather stern when talking about the outies.
We're not the same, actually. Us and the outies, we're not. And speaking for myself, I don't think we owe them shit.
Dylan wants to stay because it may be the only way he gets to know more about his family. It's not a coincidence Milchik parses out bits of information like his wife's name is Gretchen, then proceeds to show him the blueprints for the outie visitation suite. If Dylan decides to leave, he'll never see his family. Then there's Irv, who's the hardest to convince. He found out his love, a retired optics and design employee named Bert, is in a relationship in the outside world. The pain of knowing he can't be with him is unbearable.
I want the pain to be over.
He'll end up staying partly due to Dylan's speech.
All I'm saying is if Bert was still here, he would be telling you to stick around and figure out what the this is.
With the team deciding to stay, the episode ends, but I do want to talk a bit more about this cryptic computer image of Miss Casey. On the screen is a bunch of biometric data such as heart rate and temperature, which both appear to be normal. The PCKT rate and time refers to packets of electronic data being transmitted, once again implying that what Macrorefinement is doing is linked to Miss Casey. And what about this number here? It's very similar to the number found on Helly's Severance chip back in episode 102. There's also these circles which look like they could be cells. A ladder beside it might represent DNA. If you look real close over here, you can see a symbol that looks like a microphone. A similar symbol can be found on Miss Huang's computer. Now I'm going to briefly go over some interesting things I found in the season's trailers that might help us figure out what happens next. We have this shot of Mark waking up in that orientation room in different clothing. It may mean he's had his memory wiped several times and had to be reintroduced. We'll see more of Irv and Bert's outies. Irv even gets a melon party. Milchik asks Mark's outie about whether he will return to Lumon, so we'll be getting some flashbacks to fill in that 5-month gap. Miss Cobel back at Lumon, and if you look in the reflection in the back, here she's meeting with Helly. Both of them wear the same outfits from the season 1 finale, so this looks to take place directly after the overtime contingency was turned off. Miss Casey is also back, and it looks like the team has put together missing persons pictures. Notice how Miss Casey wears wears all black, the same color Irv used to paint the elevator hallway where we last saw her. Mark will make his way to this hallway and notice how he's not in his suit. Is this his outie? Because in a later shot we do see him in the same sweater in the outside world. Perhaps he's having some of that reintegration sickness. He'll also hear from his sister that his innie said his wife is alive, so you better believe Mark's outie will want to get to the bottom of this. Miss Cobel leaving her home with some luggage. Where is she going? Now that her cover's been blown, it's no wonder she'd want to leave. Mark confronts her and asks what this is all about. Mark and Gemma together, most likely a flashback. Here we have what might be our 4 innies, or outies, traveling in these almost Russian-like outfits. It's possible our outies team up as well. Now I know this is what everyone's here for, what is up with all these goats, and it looks like we'll learn a bit more. There's a whole ass goat department. Mark talks to these workers, trying to convince them in his fight to find Casey. Reg, the woman who tried to help Petey reintegrate last season, and who also killed Mr. Grainer, makes an appearance. She works for a large unknown group that wants to take Lumon down, so she may be integral in helping our outies. But now I turn it over to you. What do you think will happen next? I want to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
I love you.